What's up, everybody? Ryan Turford here, and welcome to my final video of 4 talking about the PS3, PS Vita, and PSP stores shutting down. Today's video, all about the PS Vita and kind of my picks, 10 picks anyways, for games that you should check out from the PlayStation Vita store. Obviously, these are kind of my personal recommendations. Obviously, the Vita store is huge. In fact, the library on the Vita digital store is actually almost bigger than the PS3 digital library. So obviously, I'm bound to have missed some games. So obviously, if there's a game I missed, just understand that, again, that doesn't mean your game's bad or your favorite game's bad. It just means that obviously I had to keep this list short, and I did have some considerations for this list. Obviously, again, I didn't go to price charting and sort by most expensive games and kind of just pick them that way. I wanted to make sure that this was like a curated, recommended list of games that I highly recommend you check out on your Vita. Also gave serious consideration to games that are digital only, that didn't really get physical releases, or if they did get physical releases, they would have been through limited run, and as such, would be very hard to find out. So those are kind of my criteria. And again, I just wanted to make this list really fun, and that was kind of my top priority for this list. So we're going to start off with Severed. This game is from Drinkbox Studios, the makers of Guacamelee. Now, Severed is available on some other platforms, but I would recommend picking up on Vita because it was pretty much designed for the Vita in mind. It's got touchscreen controls. Again, for some reason, they did like a Switch version of this game, but you can only play it in handheld mode because of the way the touch controls work. But it's a first-person RPG that, again, really utilizes the touchscreen for doing swipes, basically severing the limbs of your enemies, which was kind of cool. And it's got like a really fantastic art style, great story, and it's a really fantastic game. Again, Drinkbox did an amazing job with Guacamelee 1 and 2, and I definitely think Severed is a game worth picking up. Again, Guacamelee 1 and 2, the only reason I'm not including those in this list, even though they're amazing games, is because you can buy them on PlayStation 4. So you do have a route to pick up those games still. But obviously, the Vita versions of those games are great. So if you want to pick them up at all, I mean, Vita is a great place to play them as well. Next up, of course, the obvious choice. I mean, especially being a big Persona fan, of course, I would be remiss to have a Vita list that doesn't mention Persona 4 Golden, of course. This was the remake of Persona 4 that essentially tacked on an extra semester and a whole bunch of other story stuff to the end of the game. It's kind of like Persona 5 Royal, but for Persona 4 anyways, where it added a whole bunch of new content to the game. And it's honestly the best way to play Persona 4, and which is an amazing JRPG. If you've never played Persona 4 and you like turn-based RPGs like Final Fantasy, or just older RPGs in general, I think you're going to dig Persona 4 Golden, regardless of where you play it, because now, again, it's on PC. We've heard rumblings of it coming to other consoles, but obviously you're going to want to pick this one up on Vita, especially if you have a Vita. Though, obviously, if you're watching this video, you probably have it already. It's actually one of the most popular Vita games already. But obviously, it's like a duh game. Like, I have to put it on here. But the one set of Persona games that I will mention that you should pick up as well, Persona 3, 4, and 5, Dancing All Night, Dancing in Starlight, and Dancing in Moonlight. I think that all three of these games are fantastic rhythm games. I love music games in particular, and even though all three of these games are available on PlayStation 4, they are very much built for Vita in mind, with the way that it displays all of the visual information for all of the songs. Definitely, I think it's the best way to play these games. So if you're at all interested in those, you should buy the Vita versions. And again, those Vita versions are going to be very expensive to purchase physically later once everything starts to go up, especially Persona 4 Dancing All Night. I think is definitely one to pick up for sure if you're going to pick up any one of these, only because it expands the story beyond the end of Persona 4, and it actually shows you kind of what all the characters are up to once the story's over. So it's kind of like the sequel to Persona 4, just not in RPG form, just in like this rhythm game form, which I think is just super cool when I played it. They didn't do that with Persona 3 or 5. I don't know why they didn't. Mainly, I think with 5, they knew Strikers was coming, which was kind of going to be that pseudo-sequel. And then they kind of did that with Persona 3 Portable with the female side. So, again, Persona 4 Dancing All Night, fantastic game. And any one of the Persona games on Vita, you should have in your collection. Of course, everyone knows I love JRPGs. I've talked about it to death on all these videos. And Tales of Hearts R is a great action RPG. Of course, it's another in the long line of the Tales series. In fact, it's one of the it's the only mainline portable Tales game, essentially. And it's just as good as any of the console counterparts. And it's a game that is definitely creeping up in value, and I think is probably going to shoot up in value once the stores close. So I definitely think that now is the time to grab this game if you are at all interested in it. It plays like the other Tales games where, again, you go around on the overall overhead map, but then it's like behind the back kind of third-person action RPG. So again, just like all the other Tales games, it's got a great story, it's got a ton of content, and it's definitely worth checking out, especially, again, if you've never played a Tales game. This might be the best part to start with, although I would argue, again, if you've never played a Tales game before, you should start with either Tales of Xillia on PlayStation 3 or Tales of Berseria, the newest game in the series on PlayStation 4. But Tales of Hearts are still a great Tales game. Again, the nice thing about the Tales games is they're kind of like Final Fantasy, where it doesn't matter where you start because they're all self-contained stories. So I think that this one was actually one of the better Tales games, so I definitely recommend checking it out. Next up is a game that I totally could have included on my PS3 list, but I decided to put it on the PS Vita list instead, and that game is Jet Set Radio. This is actually a re-release of the original game from the Dreamcast, all about going around the city on your rollerblades and putting up cool graffiti. It's really fun. It's got this really cool, stylish look to it, and it still holds up really well today. And I think it's a great pickup, and I love playing it on Vita. Like, that's kind of the place I kind of want to play this game. Or if you have a Vita TV, I think this game's great to play on there as well. So definitely Jet Set Radio, game I highly recommend. Whether you pick it up on PS3 or PS Vita, like, you should just grab it, especially before it's gone, because this was digital only, so there's no physical release of this. So once it's gone, so make sure to grab it now. Next up, we're going to do two games back-to-back from Vanillaware, one of my favorite Japanese studios. We're going to start with Muramasa Rebirth. This is a side-scrolling action game. This was actually a re-release of a game on the Wii called Muramasa the Demon Blade, but this was essentially like a Vita port of that game. However, it plays way better on Vita than it did on the Wii. I mean, the Wii, yes, it was totally fine and serviceable there, but the Vita version is gorgeous. It's got this hand-drawn art style that looks beautiful on the OLED screen, or if you have the LCD screen, it looks great too there. But it's got like fantastic use of color that just really pops. It's just really fun to play. Like all of Vanillaware's games have always looked super stylish, but have always made sure that the gameplay comes first as well, until 13 Sentinels, where they kind of went a different direction with that game. But whether you're playing Dragon's Crown or this game or the next game we're about to talk about, make sure you pick up Muramasa Rebirth, because again, this game's really creeping up in price right now if you want to buy a physical copy of it. Again, it's been a long time since I've seen a physical copy of it anywhere. So it's one game that I think you're going to want to grab digitally while you still can. The other game from Vanillaware that I was kind of alluding to, Odin Sphere Leifthrasir, or Leifthrasir, or however you say it. I don't know how to say the name, okay? I'm really bad at pronunciations. Everyone knows this. Of course, though, Odin Sphere, just kind of like Muramasa Rebirth, very similar gameplay style, where it's a side-scrolling action-adventure game. You play as a bunch of different characters, and kind of each character has their own individual story, and each one of them is actually really interesting. And it's, again, got a fantastic art style. And it also includes the original Odin Sphere in this game. That is basically the original version of the game. If you want to play it without all the fancy upgrades, you can certainly do that. Or you can play it with all of the new upgrades, which I think is definitely my recommendation for anyone who's never played it before. It is definitely much easier to get into that way. Gorgeous game, though. Gorgeous, gorgeous game. One of the prettiest games on Vita, though. So I would definitely recommend checking out Odin Sphere, regardless of where you play it, because this is also available on PlayStation 4, but honestly, it looks and plays so well on Vita that honestly, I'd recommend playing it there instead. Next up, we got a PC game that was ported to PS Vita, and that is Papers, Please. So Papers, Please, basically in this game, you play as a border guard. Basically, you're waiting for people to come by your booth to basically show you their identification, and it's up to you to basically weed out the people that are allowed to come into the country or are allowed to not come in. Essentially, you have to call the guards to basically haul this person away. You're in this weird, like, almost like dictatorship again. They don't really go too much into like the governmental system there, so I don't know what the situation is in this particular fictional country that you're in. But it's just it's really dystopian game, and it it doesn't make you feel good inside, but it's actually a really fun game to play. Again, makes great use of the touch controls because again, you have to go through some of the ID stuff and then kind of and their other personal effects and kind of look at them individually to kind of verify that they are who they say they are. And again, if you screw up, you actually lose money that goes towards your family, and eventually, if you make too many mistakes, your family starves to death. So again, not a very bleak looking game, but I think that Papers, Please, fantastic game to play on your Vita. Again, it's probably my favorite place to play Papers, Please because I have the PC version, but I don't know, there was something about playing it on Vita that was just really fun. And again, this is another game that didn't get a physical release, so it will be going poof when the store goes away. So definitely make sure to pick this game up now. Speaking of digital-only games, Sound Shapes is our next game. Now, of course, this game is available on PlayStation 4, as well as PS3, as well as Vita, and it's cross-buy, so if you buy it on one platform, you get it on all three. But the reason I wanted to put Sound Shapes on this list is, again, probably my favorite place to play Sound Shapes. Again, really fun, musical-based platforming game where essentially you play as like a glob or piece of goop or something. You got a little eye. You're like the Sound Shapes blob, essentially, is what Podcast Beyond dubbed it back in the day. And you're going around basically trying to get through these different environments that, again, like basically change along with the beat of whatever music is playing. There's a lot of really cool music to play along with as well. And there's a ton of DLC for this game as well. And in fact, if you want like easy platinum trophies, again, the platinum trophy for this is pretty easy to get. And then you can actually copy it you're saved between all three versions of the game to get multiple platinums. If you're that person, you can certainly do that. But Sound Shapes, though, I wanted to make sure to include it on at least one of these lists, and definitely the place it fit the best is the Vita list, because if you're going to play it anywhere, I think you should play it on Vita. I think it's a great place to play it. Now, every self-respecting Vita list has to include at least one visual novel on this list, because, I mean, visual novels are a huge, huge genre on the Vita. And honestly, my picks for you to check out would be Steins Gate and Steins Gate Zero. These are kind of based off the hit manga and anime series, even though, again, the events from the visual novel actually unfold much differently than they do in the anime. In fact, I think it's a little bit more bleak than the anime is. The anime, of course, all about time travel, using this like microwave that this mad scientist invented to basically travel through time by putting a banana in the microwave. It's really bizarre, but it got some really funny moments. But again, it's just it goes to some dark places as well, and kind of makes you question, what you can do with time travel and why maybe it might not be a good thing to have the ability to travel through time. So honestly, Steins Gate, though, both games are fantastic to pick up. And again, you can play them on PlayStation 4, but Vita, man, Vita is the best way to play these games, especially on the go, especially with visual novels too. Because like, I don't know if it's just me, but I don't know if I really love playing visual novels on TV. I was kind of distressed that I can't put the Danganronpa games on this list because you can't purchase them digitally anymore, because they delisted them a long time ago as part of NIS losing the publishing rights to Danganronpa, and they haven't been republished to the store yet, so you're not able to buy these games. So you do have to buy physical games of those. But Steins Gate are the games that I wanted to include instead. Again, fantastic read from top to bottom from both games. So I definitely really recommend checking them out if you want some visual novels. And last but not least, a couple games that got physical releases, but are actually much cheaper to buy on the store if you want to go that route. We got Zero Escape, the Nonary games, and Zero Time Dilemma. This actually includes all three games across the Zero Escape series. Now, if you never played the Zero Escape series, it's kind of like Saw the video game, but without all the torture porn stuff, where it's very much all about they're almost like Escape Room, the game kind of thing, where essentially your character is kind of locked in a room, and it's essentially a visual novel combined with like a 3D puzzle game, essentially, where you basically have to progress the story until a certain point, and then you'll have to find a way to escape a room within a certain time frame, essentially, before getting locked in. There's a ton of different story choices and consequences, and it really goes down a bunch of branching paths depending on some of your choices. And all three games are really different from each other, and I love that they did a collection with 999 and Virtue's Last Reward in the Nonary games, but then also Zero Time Dilemma, a fantastic conclusion to the entire saga. So definitely well worth checking out all three games. And again, they're available on PS4, But honestly, the best way to play these is on Vita because, again, they are so text heavy and are very much visual novels in addition to also being puzzle games. And that's going to do it for my PlayStation Vita recommendation list. And these are only 10 games out of, again, like 1,100 games on Vita. So again, obviously, I missed some games. So let me know in the comments below what games you would recommend to pick up on Vita beforehand. Of course, I didn't want to include games like Uncharted Golden Abyss on here or Gravity Rush. I think those games are very easy to find physically. And again, they're still pretty cheap. And I don't really anticipate them going up in price. But obviously, if you haven't picked those up yet, you're going to want to grab those as well as something like Killzone Mercenary, I think is fantastic as well. But obviously, I wanted to make sure to give the spotlight to, again, some of the lesser known games, but also games that are either play best on Vita or are games that are gonna completely disappear once the store goes down. But anyways, let me know what you think down below. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You also find the Xbox Drive, my Xbox podcast, over on youtube.com/the Xbox Drive, or on podcast services around the globe. So I'm Ryan Turford. I'm Ryan Turford. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to check out any of my other videos about the PS3 and Vita store closures, you can definitely click the playlist link in the description of this video, or up there if you want to click there as well. And until then, friends, I'm Ryan Turford, and I'm out.